Well, we're here debating same-sex marriage. I'm Maggie Gallagher, and this is John Corvino. John, I promised you I started out being this is an unusual situation for the show, right? We're co-authors, not a host and an interviewer. So I kind of hosted the first half an hour. So let me turn it over to you, and what burning questions do you have for me that you really want to know?
Well, let's talk about something from the book, and I want to, I'm going to read a paragraph from my section.
Okay.
This is from Chapter 2, which is my opening chapter, and I'm describing a same-sex wedding scene. I say, as Boyd and Josh walk down the aisle hand in hand, preceded by their parents, I notice that they're sweating. This is probably less from anxiety than from the heat. It's June, and the old brick church where this is happening isn't air-conditioned. The couple are wearing smart black tuxedos. Their fathers are dressed in suits, their mothers in tasteful formal dresses. The sun is beating through the stained-glass windows, and many in the congregation are fanning themselves with their programs. Along the aisle, there are simple floral arrangements tied to the pews with cream-colored ribbon. Everyone's smiling. Were it not for the absence of a bride, you'd have a hard time distinguishing this scene from any other wedding. In your rebuttal, you said that last line, were it not for the absence of a bride, was the one that, of everything that I wrote, and I wrote a lot of pages in here, that stuck out and really got to you. So I want you to talk about that. And
yeah, you take the woman out of the wedding, and then you proceed as if it's like that, except for that, it's just the same. But it is, in fact, the union of male and female. What makes this, I think, even people who have no religion, a sense of quasi-sacredness, is the intimate connection between marriage and the link between the generations. It's the hope that when it's the sense that the grounding of our own being is being reenacted in front of us. And I have a lot of emotion around it because I've been thinking about this. I don't think I quite said it in the book, but I think this is part of the central lie of the sexual revolution generally, and I am a child of the sexual revolution. I graduated from Yale in 1982. I was a pro-life atheist at the time, and the really big lie is that the relationship of sex to generativity, the reality that this is the act that makes new life, that women uniquely bear this life within our bodies, that it's a great gift, but it also is a great vulnerability. And, in the 80s it was orthodox feminism, really, which I felt was trying to suppress these truths. We have separated sex from reproduction, right? Well, no, we haven't, right? We haven't. And I do think that before we can see same-sex unions as marriage, we're making a decision about how seriously we're going to, treat this phenomenon. That first of all, that when men and women have sex, they often make children. 3/4 of all births are unintended by at least one of their parents, right? And on the one hand, this is a problem. Children are hurt because when men and women do this without being married, children lose their fathers, and women, it's very costly to be an unmarried mother. It's very difficult, speaking as someone who was one for 10 years. And so for me, the question, well, on the one hand, I think most people who advocate for same-sex marriage want it to be only a question, what do we think about gay people and how do we show respect? We are simultaneously making a decision about whether we're going to institutionalize what I think is some of the worst features of the sexual revolution, including we live in a culture that represses our awareness of what we should be elevating, which is that relationships between men and women are freighted with this possibility. Men and women are the kinds of people when they, who are shaped by this reality in ways that we don't even know. And marriage is the one institution which was, not only in this culture but in all cultures, designed to manage this reality, to elevate it so that instead of becoming a social problem, it becomes this quasi-sacred groundwork of our being, the way through which we carry society forward. And I don't think that you are going to be able to strengthen or sustain that vision of marriage when you've institutionalized this cross-cutting pressure coming from the idea not only of gay marriage, but of marriage equality, which is there isn't any important moral difference in the status of same-sex and opposite-sex unions. And,
I just want to make clear that
clinging to that principle, even if it's not one that you personally hold, it is what you're seeing overarching. I mean, when I started 10 years ago, if you said marriage, the ideal for a child is a married mother and father, and that's why we shouldn't do gay marriage, the response was puzzlement, like how are these things related? Now it's a vehement rejection of the ideal for a child as a married mom and dad, because that conflicts with the core new moral norm that marriage equality, I think, is trying to embody.
Right.
You can't just take the woman out of the wedding
right.
and act as if nothing has been lost.
Right. And you of course, know since then that the reason I wrote that line was a sort of shorthand, because one of the readers said to me, you need to paint the picture more, talk about the smell of the flowers,
you were
the sound of
surprised
the
in a way
music, so I'm like, it just looked like a wedding. But, okay, so I get the fact that you want people to take seriously the awesome responsibility of the creation of new life. You want mothers, and especially fathers, to stick around for the new life that they create and provide loving homes for their offspring. I get that, and we've talked about that. And of course, I don't believe that marriage equality means that there's no important moral difference between these different kinds of relationships. I think what it means is that they deserve equal treatment under the law. But here's what I don't get. It's sort of in two aspects of this. One, I think you and I would both acknowledge, and I'll let you speak for yourself on this, that Boyd and Josh don't need brides. That would be bad for them, probably. And worse, even still, would it be for the bride? For these men who are gay men who...
It would certainly be a challenging marriage. I wouldn't rule it off the table.
You wouldn't rule it off the table?
I would neither advocate for it nor rule it off the table. I mean, it would have to be done openly and honestly, not secretly.
Right. So
I wouldn't,
you don't have any daughters. If you had a daughter and they said, there's this gay guy who wants to...
I would think that would be very high risk.
High risk.
It would be very high risk.
But not off the table.
No, not off the table. There's a story, maybe you saw it, of a Mormon man in a mixed orientation marriage.
Yes.
And part of that for him was deciding that his identity as a Mormon was who has this particular, the theology towards marriage is extremely strong in the LDS faith, and marriage understood as male, female, and marriage rooted in intergenerativity. So for him, and I actually knew a Jewish man, gay man, who decided to become an Orthodox Jew, and he did not marry, but he had the same experience. It's a decision that your religious identity is more important than the identity based on your expression of your sexual desires. And so it strikes me as particularly difficult and challenging, but I can respect that as a decision if it's made in good faith and in honesty.
Okay.
I don't know if you can.
It's not that I don't respect it. I mean, I very much, I'm a pro-freedom kind of guy, and I want people to be able to pursue, openly and honestly, the kinds of relationships that they decide are suitable for them, provided that there are no non-consenting parties being harmed, no children being harmed, and so on. But suppose that's just Boyd and Josh do not see that as an option for themselves,
sure.
As most gay men would not. And yet they found each other, and yet they find that their lives are enriched, each enriched by the other, that they find that that they make each other better people. And I know I said that earlier, but I do think that that's an important part of relationship. It gets us outside of ourselves.
I have to say, one of the things that's very lovely about what you do in this book is, unlike many gay marriage advocates, you lay out a rather rich portrait of marriage as being about more than romantic love and embedded in moral and communal norms. And I think that is actually part of what we share. I do think it's a very attractive vision.
I think part of why marriage is important is that it keeps people together in commitment for the long haul, even as the romantic excitement waxes and wanes. It was funny, we were talking about Dan Savage earlier, and he had some writer write to him about, they were talking about moving in together because, the person, would then roll over in the morning and we'd get to do all kinds of exciting stuff. He's like, yeah, or, roll over in the morning and you deal with morning breath. I mean, there are all kinds, and gas and things. But they're all, so the romantic excitement, it can wax and wane over the course of years. But there's something enduring and valuable and challenging beyond that. So Boyd and Josh find each other. They find that they're good for each other. They want to pursue that further. They want to include their families in that. How do they do that? I mean, do you object to their having what looks like a wedding except for a bride? And I know you think the absence of the bride is very important. Do you object to the family and friends standing up behind them?
You're putting me in charge of issuing moral orders to people I don't know in a way that, I'm not comfortable with that. I don't think Josh and Boyd are looking for me to tell them what to do. If it were my own son,
mm-hmm.
See, here's the cross. I think love and caretaking and commitment are always valuable, and they always mean something. And I respond to that in your portrait of Josh and Boyd, and I can acknowledge that the way Josh and Boyd put together the world, they're doing something that they think is good and to be celebrated. And so I can respond to a lot of that. But for me, having my son commit to living in a gay relationship for the rest of his life would not be something that would be easy for me to celebrate. Right. So we would be in disagreement, and we'd have to figure out how to love each other across those disagreements. And I think that's, it's more intense and more challenging when it's within your own family than when, but it's also it's a related challenge about how we live and love across really deep and important moral differences.
Right. And I guess I wasn't primarily asking you because I'm looking for advice for Boyd and Josh, who probably are going to do what they're going to do regardless of your advice, or my advice for that matter. But because society, I mean, regardless of whether you believe the support is as strong as the polls say it is, there does seem to be a lot of support, and there does seem to be a trend in favor of that support, in part because, as you say, people want to respect the choice that some people are making to settle down and set up house as same-sex couples and commit to each other in that way. And what I'm asking you is, not that you run the world, but what is it?
I definitely do not run the world, darn.
But if you did run the world, I mean, what would there be room for people like that?
Well, I think as a legal matter, I think that there would be ways to structure domestic partnerships that would then probably be celebrated in families and communities in different ways. I think I say in the book, the one thing I feel very strongly about is in my perfect world, gay people would not be afraid, right? And I think I would, part of that we could, on the groundwork of pluralism and respect for, we have a lot of differences, but actually we have a lot in common too, right, as Americans. So we recognize each other as human beings, and we agree to disagree, and you people who believe in what you believe in would build communities and feel free to do that and be respected members of America. That would be my ideal world. The
domestic partnerships you talk about, is there not worry from your perspective that starts to become marriage by some other name?
Well, the problem with civil unions, I actually have avoided taking a strong position, because for me the question is our marriage tradition good, or is it discriminatory? That's the question I'm centrally interested in, and I think it's somewhat frustrating to gay people that I don't. Sometimes late at night I do come up with my 10-point plan for what Maggie would do, but I just, I don't think it's all that relevant. I think it's because if I could really win the marriage debate in a cultural sense and win the idea that marriage is the union of husband and wife for a reason, that we need to be strengthening the connection between marriage and its role in creating and connecting new life, rather than kind of trying to add in more relationships that don't that seem to me to really clearly contradict this model of what marriage is. And at that point, there would be, then the question is, how do you have a small minority of people that don't fit the marriage model?